Hey everyone, my name's Emily Cheshire. I'm with Aprio LLP. We're a CPA firm, and I'm one of the leaders of the blockchain practice at Aprio. We've been in the space for a decade now, working with everything from layer 2 blockchains, NFT companies, exchanges, and just kind of any developers in the Web3 space.
Hey everyone, I'm Kuepper. I'm involved with Sherwood Analytics, and we provide NFT analytics, specifically looking to evaluate NFT projects for investment purposes.
My name is Jane King. I have a business, Lila Max Media. I report out of the NASDAQ and daily for TV stations around the country, and I do a lot of interviews in blockchain and crypto and NFT with investors, and so I can bring some insight into all these people I've talked to over the past few years.
So I guess to start off, maybe I can go around and just ask you guys each, what do you guys think of when you think institutional money for NFT projects, and who's investing, and what do you think of when you hear that word? Okay.
So I think in this space, it's venture capital. It's kind of early stage. I don't think of these big, like the pension funds and things like that, but they're more like these early VC funds, mezzanine finance companies that recognize the potential of this technology and are willing to take some risk to invest in it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because blockchain projects and NFTs are obviously blockchain projects, are somewhat inherently contradicting what institutional money is looking for in terms of like establishment and a guaranteed return. So like, it's almost like there's this funny meme that you probably have seen where like there's this funny looking dude in this room of people with suits, and I feel like that's depicting very well what NFT projects look like to institutional money a lot of times. There are exceptions, but there aren't that many.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's kind of very niche and specialized. The VC firms in the space are ones that typically only invest in kind of Web3 projects. But I would also say there is a lot of larger tech companies out there that are looking to kind of jump into the space. And they're looking at investing in kind of Web3 businesses as well. Maybe at kind of a later kind of development stage, but they're also kind of looking to kind of get involved as well.
Yeah, and to hit off of that as well, I think that you also have to pay attention to institutions that already exist. They're trying to adopt a NFT brand. So you look at the Nike acquisition of Artifact, you look at Adidas pairing up with a lot of different projects, Budweiser doing ad deals with Zed, like things like that as well. So you're not only looking for getting institutional investment in the way we think of traditionally with software companies with venture or angel investing or series investing, but also partnerships and acquisitions by bigger brands that are looking to get into Web3, but aren't necessarily, that's not their native area, and they understand that. So while we're on that topic, what are the mistakes you see projects making either early or later on in a project that hampers their efforts to try and bring in money when they do try and look for that runway?
Should I kick it off? So one of the things that we see is that, it's that kind of failing to plan is planning to fail. So by the time that they're looking to kind of get investment, it's almost too late. We see a lot of businesses that are looking to get investment, and they want to get it right away. Now, I would say that you need to be kind of planning it from sort of day one and doing everything you can to really make sure that you're kind of geared up for that investment. And that's everything from, who your advisors are, what is your core team, what is their ability, and also, simple things like, are your finances in good order? Do you have good, reliable financials and decks that you can share with investors? Do you have forecasts in place? And really just getting ahead of that. And I think that if you're not careful, building in this space and building an NFT business, it's sexy and it's fun. And I don't blame you. I would want to be developing and building out that all day long, but you got to get the fundamentals in place too.
Yeah, and like if you're looking at investors, the question is, what are they investing in? Are they investing into like the company that provides NFTs and is then drawing revenue from that in some shape or form? Or are you looking for them to invest into the NFTs? Like Visa is buying a CryptoPunk. They are obviously not investing in Yuga Labs, the owner of CryptoPunks now, but they are just buying an NFT. And an investor will always be looking for some return. So do you have a business model? Most NFT projects have some very vague predictions and ideas as like, at some very distant point, maybe the world will love our product and you will be rich or whatever, but very rarely do you see like an actual business plan with like fundamentals and like predictions that are somewhat feasible. No predictions on any business plan are ever very reliable, but to have at least anything or something to start with.
And just two things come to mind. I remember I had interviewed a venture capitalist in this space, and he said, I don't respond to any cold calls. And he was like, the only ones I respond to are when I am introduced by somebody else in the industry. And I think his philosophy was, this is still a small enough industry that you should know people. There should be enough of a network that somebody can make an introduction. And I think that's why it's important to come to things like these, so you can meet people and connect. The other thing is that I see a lot of is these people are so smart technically, and they have trouble. They get in the weeds explaining their project and what it really means for the consumer. And how does this change somebody's life, affect them, make it easier, more efficient, whatever, enjoyable, whatever it is, just bring it back to the consumer, make it easy for the consumer to use, because ultimately that's where we're going to see mass adoption in this technology.
And I think that a lot of people, I think what everyone set up here makes sense, especially for VCs. Like they want to see fundamentals. They want to see that you have terms and conditions. They want to see, they're going to do diligence on you. So they want to see that you have everything in the background that's necessary, and sees that you're a real business. You're just not a bunch of kids that got together and minted a bunch of NFTs and now you're rich and you don't know what to do with it. Like they want to actually see what you're going to do. And on the brand side, they also want to see that you're not a hothead. You're not someone that's going to go off and say something absolutely crazy on social media that now they're going to be like, Adidas pairs up with racist or something like that. Like it's okay to have personality. That's what you want. You want a personality. That's what you're building as an NFT. But there's a fine line between having a personality and being someone that brands can trust. And I think you have to make sure you're dancing that line properly. You're not doing something that's going to hamper you later on because a post that got 27 likes on Twitter is going to ruin that. So,
I'll just say too, I'll add that I feel like this space with FTX and everything that's been going on, over the past couple of years, that I think you really have to overemphasize the ethicalness of your business, that it's a true business, it's not a scam. Just really go above and beyond, because I think there's a lot of nervousness still in the industry about that.
Yeah, I think that, the landscape and the environment has changed considerably, basically in light of FTX. Even just kind of last year, you would see a huge amount of money flowing into the space. And, a lot of people didn't even have a revenue model, which is just kind of crazy. And what they were doing was they were actually investing in the team and the development potential and the knowledge and the person, right? So they were putting a lot of faith into that. And in light of FTX and everything that's happened, they are being a lot more cautious with their money. I think it's dropped something like 90%, the investment in kind of just this year alone. So you're still wanting to have that, the personality and the credentials and, to your point about, who are they investing? Are they going to be sort of safe and protect their brands? But they also need to see kind of business plans and fundamentals behind it as well now.
Yeah, and to add to that, we have a new kid in the room, AI. So like the whole investment world is like all happy to jump into AI projects, and Web3 sort of takes a second place to that, which doesn't mean that you can't get funding, but the amount of money that flows into AI versus Web3 now is significant, combined with the scandals, FTX and all of that, just makes it a bit more harder. Like you have to prove your point. It's not that there's money sitting around that just naturally will flow. You kind of need to pull it, if that makes sense.
So I think we talked about kind of what you want when you're trying to get that first round of investment. You're trying to get that initial partner coming in. But I'd like each of you guys to talk about how an artist can, or how a project can dance that line of keeping their investors happy and knowing that there's going to be probably another round that they're going to be looking for those investors for, but also staying true to their vision and making sure that they're leading the project in the way they want to go.
Well, I'll just say I have seen people get money, and not just in this space, but in other tech and biotech and things like that, and they don't spend it very well. And I think a lot of investors want to make sure you're really spending this to grow the business, to build the technology, to market, not on, huge expensive dinners and, taking the whole team down to Florida for a week or whatever. I mean, they want to make sure the money is wisely spent right now. So I do see that happening, and I think that's one thing that you really got to be careful of, and to make sure that you're building the product and not, burning through the cash.
Yeah, and to add to that, a lot of artists are not necessarily inventors in that way. Like, they're not building a product, they are doing art, which is fine. And there are ways to invest in art, but that's usually not the motivation that drives them or the people who actually buy art. And let's face it, like, NFTs may have started out as art, but I can guarantee you that 70% of the people who buy NFTs are not buying just because they like a certain picture. They do it from an investment perspective. And so to have that in mind, if you are an artist, think about who are you trying to attract. Are you trying to attract collectors? Because that's fine, but that's not necessarily a business. Or are you trying to give them something to invest in? And we have to be very careful, especially in this country, when we talk about investments in crypto. However, if you do want people to buy your product and you want to take revenue out of that and provide that to your investors at some point, then you need to be really thinking about what that looks like and how that will happen reliably.
And then kind of just touching on, you were sort of mentioning kind of working with investors and also kind of managing the cash flow. I would kind of take a step kind of earlier of that and just kind of say that, when you're looking at investors, it's a two-way street. It's a relationship. The investors are there to want you and the business to be successful. So you want to be really selective on who you're working with as well, rather than just saying yes to the first investor that comes along. Different investors have different backgrounds and focus on different companies, and they also have different requirements from you. Some will just be investing in the company and you, and they're kind of leave you to it. Others are very hands-on, have a lot of kind of requests in what they want to see, and there's no right or wrong answer, but it's just about finding the right investor that works for the environment you're in. And that will also kind of maintain, how you keep them happy, and then also, in future funding rounds as well, what that would look like too.
And that kind of brings us to another topic, which I think is good, and that's separating the consumer from the investor. Like he talked about, there is obviously the SEC gorilla in the room that everyone's worried about, and everybody knows when they're trying to get ready to release a utility token for their project or something else, that's going to come into high oversight. So what would you guys advise for people that are knowing that they're going to release a utility token at some point and targeting their communications to make sure that they're not foreclosing that later on down the line if they want to do that?
Get a good lawyer. I mean, you definitely need one. And what is so desperately needed in this industry is regulation. And it's just so frustrating that we can't get Washington to focus on this. I mean, I know there's a million things going on, but they've talked about it, and it's kind of been, I've been, as long as I've been doing interviews on this for 5 years, there's been this security versus utility token debate going on, and it's still there, and they haven't figured it out yet. So I feel like, that's needed. So what you need is somebody who understands the space and can help you navigate that. And I think until we get some clarification on this, you'd have to operate conservatively.
Yeah, and we see that happening with projects that are well established, like all the Yuga Lab projects, like the Bored Apes or any of those. You can see there how they are very careful about anything they do. Like, any token is always going through like 3 entities removed from their main company, and they're very careful, and you do need a good lawyer to craft this carefully. But you can also see the trends in the industry and how the regulatory entities are responding to that. Like Coinbase is spearheading this discussion, obviously, as a public company. They work with the SEC for many years already, and so they are driving the conversation that is happening right now over like, what is a security? Why would this be or why would this not be? And so not to make it super simple, but to follow the big guys may not be the worst approach, or especially as a starting point when you're just looking into what you can do. And then just getting familiar with like the Howey test and what the SEC is looking for. Don't use terms like investment or any of those basic principles that your lawyer would tell you too. Just looking around what everyone else is doing to get a feel for where the industry is at, because no matter where regulation ends, it will affect everyone equally. So getting a good grip of the industry, I would say.
We actually work with quite a few companies that want to put a utility token in place, but are holding back with all the uncertainty right now. But what they're doing is, making sure that they've got the right infrastructure so that once they're ready to do so, they can. And by infrastructure, what I mean is, are they working with a lawyer? Are they working with like a CPA firm? Do they have the right group structure in place already? Because there's a lot of uncertainty right now in the US, and it's much easier to have everything set up with the, where they want to go in mind, rather than kind of just have everything sort of, set up, and then decide at a later date. So it's really, working with the right professionals to make sure that you've got the right, structure and advice in place from day one, so that hopefully once that regulation comes in place, and hopefully it's sooner rather than later, that they're ready to kind of pull that trigger.
I don't think the time to start thinking about communications and how you're marketing what you're selling starts when you're trying to release a utility token. I think it goes back to when you're releasing the NFT yourself. I think when you're talking about an NFT that has some kind of other value, some kind of utility to it, membership to a club, a video game that you guys are building with it, something like that, you still have to focus on the communications and making sure you're talking about the access that the NFT gives people, the utility the NFT gives people, but not the value. Not focused on floor price, not focused on that this is going to increase in value, that when everyone plays a video game, everyone's going to want to pay an insane amount for the NFT, things like that. You do want to focus on keeping it separated on who your consumers are and who your investors are. So when you're talking to VCs, when you're talking to investors, that's fine to talk about return on investment. That's fine to talk about that kind of thing. When you're talking to public, when you're talking to your consumers, you need to be focused on utility and what is going to be delivered from the NFT that's not monetary based. So along the same kind of lines, I think we kind of talked about that projects are they're doing due diligence, they're looking at project founders, they're looking at things that are said on Discord and Twitter and everywhere else when they're looking for who to partner with. Is there a policy that you guys recommend for projects to put in place for communications, on running communications through a central person, or some kind of vetting process on the people that do have access to the Discord moderation, the Twitter page, anything like that?
I don't really have a project, but I was from a media point of view. I think maybe not one person, but maybe a couple, maybe 3 on a team or something, where you can kind of bounce ideas off and each other and keep your message clear. I mean, I think especially in these early stages, you really want to have your message, keep it clear, keep it simple. And that's the best way to, in an easy to understand business, is going to be better from a media point of view, consumer point of view, and I think investor point of view as well.
To add to that, I would say it's at this point in time quite important to be fully doxed. So like to release your identities and to not be some anonymous figure. That worked like 2 years ago, but at this point people are kind of tired of it, especially with like FTX and rug pulls from projects where you thought they were legit and they weren't. So you doing it anonymously, I wouldn't recommend you doing that, because people will be way too suspicious.
Yeah, and I would also kind of add that with any communication, you obviously want to get your name out there, but just be careful. The SEC, for example, they do look at what you're putting out there to determine, hey, could this be a security? So, and they will look back. So, I would always make sure that whoever you've got internally on a team, either make sure that you've got legal counsel or have someone internally with that experience that can just kind of review anything before it's put out there.
And I think we spent a good amount of time talking about how to like attract institutional money to a project. But when you're a project, considering who you're going to have invest in your project to partner up with you, whether that be a brand deal or a VC or whatever, what is it that what would you tell projects to look for? What would you think is most important? Is it just dollar signs? Is it the partnership? Is it brand names? What do you think is most important?
Well, strategic alliance mostly. So like there are the VCs out there or institutional money in general that is fairly broad, like A16Z, for example, invests in like pretty much anything in the crypto space. So like having them wouldn't be something very strategic, except for like it's a name brand that people know and trust. But there are more specific VCs and people that you could align yourself with, maybe specifically to your kind of art that you're doing. If your art is related to a specific field, getting a museum on board or something like that might be a worthwhile strategy.
And I was just going to say, be careful of not giving too much of the company away, because we've seen so many early stage companies, they've given too much away. They're so desperate. They finally get somebody who's interested. So even as tempting as it is, have other people look it over who've been through this process and advise you on it.
Yeah, I would also kind of add, be careful, be really selective, be picky. Connections in this space are key. It's a very small industry, so we just want to make sure that, you want to be working with someone that is going to open doors. So a lot of VCs will literally just focus on NFTs, some focus on metaverse. Find your people, because they, not only are they going to help you attract additional investment, they can also make connections for you so you can kind of grow and expand the company too.
And just to wrap things up, I agree with all that, and I think that's also important to make sure that whoever you're getting as an investor aligns with your vision, whether that be a clothing brand, whether that be a video game, whatever it is. If it means taking in less money, but you have a true partner, someone that can help you shepherd to whatever your goal is with your project, I think that that's worthwhile, as opposed to just focusing on dollar signs, as opposed to someone that can help you in a non-monetary way as well. Thank you guys all I think that's all our time.
Thank you so much. Super interesting.